You've heard the story before. Everyone has. It gets passed around on Reddit, whispered in late-night Discord calls, shared on YouTube compilations under titles like the scariest creepypasta ever written, the Russian sleep experiment, a creepy little myth about Soviet scientists keeping men awake until they tore themselves apart. And you laughed at it, didn't you? Or maybe you shivered, then moved on, telling yourself it was just another internet campfire tale, a piece of fiction, nothing more. That's what I thought too. For years, I rolled my eyes every time someone brought it up. But here's the problem with legends. Sometimes they're not legends at all. Sometimes they're warnings. And sometimes they're cover stories, cheap disguises for the truth, so that when someone like me finally speaks up, you'll dismiss it as another creepypasta. But I can't dismiss it anymore. I've seen things, files, footage, scars, that no piece of fiction could ever conjure. I've spoken to people who shouldn't exist. I've stood in places that history swears were demolished decades ago. And I've realized something terrifying. The Russian sleep experiment wasn't a story. It was a test, a prototype. And what they created, it never stopped. If you keep listening, I'll show you why I can never sleep again, why I'm terrified to close my eyes for even a second. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why this legend should have stayed buried. Because the truth doesn't just keep you awake, it hunts you when you try to rest.
Everyone remembers the story the same way. 10 or so political prisoners locked inside a sealed chamber in the late 1940s, a special stimulant gas pumped in to keep them awake. At first, the subjects behaved like ordinary men, talking, whispering, begging for sleep. Then the days dragged on. By the 5th night, the whispers turned to screams. By the 10th, they'd stopped speaking entirely, choosing instead to mutilate themselves, tearing at flesh and organs as if something inside demanded to be freed. When the scientists finally opened the chamber, the men weren't men anymore. They were broken shells of themselves, still awake, still conscious, refusing to let go of that cursed awareness. The final words from one of them, if you believe the copy-pasted tale, were something along the lines of, "Keep cutting, I must remain awake." Cute, right? A little gore, a little shock value. The internet ate it up. Forums, creepypasta wikis, YouTube narrations, everyone treated it like the perfect scary bedtime story. They say it was fiction, just like Slender Man, Jeff the Killer, or whatever cheap nightmare teenagers use to spook each other. But here's the thing. Corpses don't stay cute. The legend you've read has holes in it, details that don't line up, phrases too clinical to have been dreamed up by a random teenager, a timeline that feels almost rehearsed. And more importantly, there are things missing. Entire procedures, behaviors, side effects that only make sense if the story was cut down from something real. Like a redacted report rewritten as horror entertainment, a convenient mask. I didn't believe it either. I dismissed the inconsistencies as sloppy writing, bad editing, but then I saw the files. And the story I thought I knew, it was only the introduction.
I never went looking for proof, not at first. But sometimes proof finds you. For me, it came on a scratched up USB drive slid under my apartment door. No note, no return address, just a faint, greasy fingerprint pressed against the plastic. At first, I thought it was some hacker's idea of a prank. The folders inside were messy, half Russian, half English, full of corrupted files with names like exp_chamber_004.final and prisonervoice.log. Most wouldn't open. The ones that did, I wish they hadn't. There were photographs, grainy, black and white stills of the chamber. At a glance, they match the versions you've probably seen floating around online. Pale figures huddled in the dark, their eyes reflecting the camera flash. But zoom in, and the differences crawl out. You can see restraints bolted into the walls, deeper scratches in the steel than any fingernail could make. One frame showed a man mid-scream, except his jaw seemed unhinged, stretched far beyond bone's natural limits. The file was labeled simply Subject 3, Phase 12. The documents were worse. Cold, clinical language that slipped sometimes into something closer to panic. Pages and pages of black bars covering lines, but enough words leaked through to paint a picture. Hallucinations, persistent. Hostility redirected inward. Vocalizations beyond human range. And then there were the transcripts. Snippets of scientists whispering to each other, their voices thin and distorted. Don't record this part. If anyone hears, it's awake even when they close their eyes. No, not subjects. The gas itself. Listen. One audio file cut off with something I can't forget. A sudden burst of static, then something between a roar and a chorus of voices, before silence. I shouldn't share this with anyone. Honestly, I shouldn't even still have it, but you need to hear what they said before the screams cut out. Because no fiction includes the gas hissing in the background, the desperate pleading in a language older than Russian. The documents gave me pieces. But paper doesn't bleed. People do. And I met one.
I didn't believe the files. Not fully. I told myself they were doctored. Maybe part of some elaborate ARG, the kind people cook up to make a story go viral. But then I found him. Or maybe he found me. His name, at least the one he gave me, was Mikhail. He was old. Older than the wrinkles carved into his face should have allowed. His hands shook when he lit his cigarette. His eyes darted at every noise like the air itself was out to get him. We met in a cafe in Brighton Beach, where Russian retirees gathered like shadows. He sat across from me, hunched, his voice no louder than the scrape of a chair leg. "You read the reports," he said, not asked. His accent was thick, but his English was sharp, practiced. "They tell you what? That it was story? That it was myth?" He leaned closer, and I caught the smell of smoke and something else, metallic, like rusted iron. I was there. I tried to laugh it off, but he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't dismiss me. You don't sleep after you've seen them. Not truly." He told me about the chamber. Not the way the Creepypasta describes it, but the way a man recalls a nightmare that never ended. The hiss of the gas, always in your ears, your lungs. The way exhaustion clawed at your mind, but the stimulant kept dragging you forward, past sanity, past humanity. "The hunger," he whispered, eyes watering. "It is not hunger for food. It is hunger for silence, for an end. You understand, but end never comes." His voice cracked, and he pressed the cigarette to his lips just to have something to hold. His hands trembled so badly I thought he'd drop it. He went on, "They said it was prisoners. Lies. Some were volunteers, patriots, soldiers. They believed in science. They believed in strength. By the end, they believed only in tearing their own flesh. You think men scream? No, the gas screams through them. The body only vessel." I asked him if he was a survivor. He laughed, a dry, broken sound. "Survivor? No one survives. Some of us, we remain. That is different." Then his eyes locked on mine, wet, red-rimmed, furious. "There are things I will not tell you. Not now, not ever. Because if I speak them, you will hear it too. You will carry it." He stood so suddenly the chair screeched against the tile. For a moment, his fragile frame looked like it might collapse under its own weight. But his hand on the table was steady. "You think you know fear. You don't. Not until the second facility." And with that, he left me staring at an empty chair, the faint smell of smoke and iron still hanging in the air. I thought he was delusional. Just another broken old man clinging to a half-remembered ghost. Until I found the second facility.
The coordinates Mikhail hinted at gnawed at me for weeks. I told myself I wouldn't go, that it was madness chasing a rumor from a broken old man, and yet I found myself standing in front of a forgotten Soviet bunker, half buried in a forest that seemed to hold its breath around it. The entrance was rusted steel, scarred with decades of rain and neglect. The padlock had already been cut, though by whom I couldn't guess. Each step inside echoed too loudly, as though the building itself remembered the screams it once held. The corridor stank of mold and iron, paint peeled in long strips from the walls, curling like dead skin. My flashlight beam caught restraints bolted into the concrete, straps still stiff with something darker than mildew. I wanted to believe it was rust, but rust doesn't leave claw marks gouged 3 inches deep into the floor. I found a desk covered in journals, their pages warped from damp. Most were indecipherable, written in a tight, frantic hand, but a few phrases stood out. Phase 2 incomplete. Subject vocalizations unnatural. Don't let them sleep. Ever. Then came the tapes. Dusty reels stacked in metal tins, their labels half faded. I played one on an ancient recorder, the static hissing before voices emerged. Day 14. Subject refuses food, requests only gas. Repeats phrase, cannot translate. Keep recording. Moscow must hear this. For God's sake, stop writing, just listen. The audio ended in a thud, then a long silence, broken by something wet dragging across the floor. Everywhere I turned, the facility felt less abandoned and more waiting. My flashlight flickered against the final chamber door, heavy steel, bent inward, not outward, as though something inside had pressed and pressed until the hinges groaned. On the wall nearby, someone had scrawled in flaking paint, "Knee spot. Do not sleep." I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to let the legend remain a legend, but my hand was already on the handle. And what I found in the final chamber wasn't in any story you've read.
The door groaned when I pushed it, metal shrieking against metal, a sound so sharp it seemed to slice through the silence. The air that seeped out was foul, thick with mold, copper, and something sweet and rotting, like flowers left too long on a grave. My flashlight trembled in my grip as the beam cut across the chamber. The room wasn't empty. At first, I thought I was looking at a bundle of rags in the corner, scraps of a jumpsuit eaten away by time. Then it moved, just slightly, a twitch like muscle memory in a corpse. My breath caught. The figure shifted into the light. It was not dead, not alive either. Skin like parchment clung to bones, eyes black pits that glistened wet in the beam. Its chest rose shallowly as if every breath was both agony and compulsion. The restraints that had once bound it were broken, twisted metal curled like ribbons around skeletal wrists. And then it spoke. Not words, not in any language I knew. A chorus of whispers, layered and uneven, pouring from its throat like dozens of voices trying to fit through a single mouth. My recorder caught a fragment. When I played it back later, the audio spiked into frequencies that didn't register on human scales. It dragged itself toward me, movements jerky and wrong, as though its body had forgotten how to be human. Every joint bent too far, every step sounded like bone grinding on bone. I staggered back, my flashlight skittering across the walls. That's when I saw them. Streaks of blood, fresher than they should have been, smeared along the concrete like finger-painted warnings. I don't know what madness gripped me, but I raised my phone and snapped a photo, just one. The flash lit the chamber like lightning, and for an instant, the thing's face filled the frame. Mouth torn into a grin too wide, gums blackened, teeth cracked like glass. I still have that photo. I shouldn't, but I do. And I'll show you what they don't want you to see.
though I promise you'll wish I hadn't. Because once you've seen it, you'll start to hear it too. The hiss of gas, the layered whispers, the invitation to stay awake just a little longer. I stumbled out of the chamber, heart battering my ribs, certain that if I blinked, if I closed my eyes, it would be there waiting. But when I looked back, just once, it wasn't in the room anymore. That's when I realized something far worse than the experiment being real. I'd made a mistake. I let it follow me.
I don't remember driving home. One moment I was stumbling out of that bunker, lungs raw with the stink of rot and rust, and the next I was in my apartment, door locked, curtains drawn. I should have felt safe, but safe isn't a word that means anything to me anymore. The nights blur now. Coffee cups pile on my desk. My laptop glows like a lighthouse in the dark, but the shadows still crawl closer. At 3 a.m., without fail, I hear the whispers. Not outside, inside. Sliding just beneath the hum of my refrigerator, threading through the fan on my desk. Dozens of voices layered together, asking me to stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. Sometimes I find scratches on my arms, not deep, but new, as though something is practicing on me, marking its territory. I'd blame myself, but the lines are too straight, too deliberate. I used to laugh at people who said stories could infect you. That was before I saw the proof, before I carried it home with me. And now, if you're watching this, if you've heard the gas in my recordings or seen the photo I took, maybe you've already been exposed too.
I know what you're thinking, that this is just another story, another creepypasta dressed up with fake files and shaky audio. If that's what helps you sleep tonight, hold on to it. But deep down, you know I'm not lying. The photo I showed you, that's only one fragment. There are more facilities, more survivors, and maybe more like me. People who brought something back without meaning to. People who can't close their eyes anymore. Do yourself a favor. Don't search the file names I mentioned. Don't look up the words I translated. Some doors, once opened, never close again. But if you've made it this far, prove it. Comment, "I'm still awake." Let me know who else can't shake the feeling that something is watching them from the dark corner of their room. Because once you've seen the truth, sleep doesn't come back.
I don't know how many nights it's been now. Days blur, hours dissolve. My eyes burn, my hands shake, but still, I don't sleep. I can't. The whispers won't let me. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the black screen of my laptop, and it doesn't quite match. The mouth moves slower than it should. The eyes linger too long. I wonder if that's me anymore, or if something else is using my body the way the gas used them. The Russian sleep experiment wasn't fiction. It was the beginning, and it's contagious. Every time you hear the recordings, every time you stare too long at the photo, it pulls you in. Maybe that's why I'm talking to you now, so I'm not alone in this. So when it takes me, you'll already be marked too. Don't close your eyes tonight. Don't even try, because when you do, you'll hear it. Stay awake.